In this episode, we talk about where I started as a photographer, where I'm at now, and where I want to go in the future. Welcome to the first episode of the Let's Talk About Art podcast. Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Dylan McMains, and welcome to my podcast. I've been a photographer for the last, what year is it now? 6 years or so. And in that time, I've had a lot of really cool adventures, and I've had a lot of really interesting experiences, and I've always wanted a platform to be able to share those with people. And I've found some ways to do that, with some Instagram photos or even a book I wrote. But I've always had this idea of having a podcast where I can sit down and just kind of tell some of these stories that I've accumulated over the past couple of years, and it's really exciting for me to be able to do that. So in this inaugural episode of this, what I wanted to do is talk about where I started as a photographer, where I'm at now, and where my vision is looking in the future, where I want to be years down the road, or even toward the end of my life and end of my career with this. Kind of talking about where I was and where I want to go. With this podcast in general, I don't really have a whole lot of goals with it, honestly. I really just want this to kind of be a free-flowing creative outlet without that many expectations of anything. I just want it to be fairly lax and chill. So a little bit of info about me. I am, at least at the time of recording this, I'm 21 years old, born and raised in central New Mexico. Like I said, I've been doing photography since mid to late 2014, but I got my first real camera and started really doing it in 2015, which I'll talk about here in a sec. But I've been doing it for a little while. I mainly do landscapes now, a little bit of travel adventure stuff, and that's really my bread and butter. I've tried portrait work, and I've tried like action sports work, but it hasn't really piqued my interest as much as landscape has. So I've really stuck with that, and I've really found a true passion in it. If you want to reach me on any of my socials, you can check out my Instagram, where I'm most active at McMains Media. So you spell that McMains Media. Facebook page is going to be under the same name, and my YouTube channel will be under the same name as well. You can also head to my website, mcmainsmedia.com, and you can find hot links to all of those pages down there. So without further ado, let's just kind of get started. So when I started photography, I did not have an actual camera. I just used my cell phone, which I think at the time was a Samsung Galaxy S3. I believe. It was one of those it was one of the first really thin phones. I never had an iPhone at that point. I had only done Androids, and it was just the one that I had at the time. So I think in either September or October of 2014, my family and I took a trip down to Florida to go visit like Disney World and Universal Studios and do all the touristy stuff around there. And at that time, I had started getting into Instagram a bit. I had started using Instagram not for photography purposes, but just for goofing off in, I think, 8th grade for me, which would have been 2012 or 2013, I believe. And so I had an Instagram, and I, of course, just had all my school friends following me, but I didn't have any kind of following beside that. As time went on, I enjoyed posting different things. At the beginning of it, it was just, like I said, really goofy stuff. Like there's one photo I posted on there. To this day, still don't understand why I did it, where I took one of those extendable forks that you can get at like novelty stores. I put it next to a box of empty Tic Tacs and took a photo of it and posted it. To this day, don't know why. It's still one of the weirdest things I've ever done, but it's where I was at. And as time progressed, I started, curating a little bit more what I was posting on there. And, every now and then I post like a flower photo that I took while walking by the river or something like that, and people would like it, but I never thought anything of it. So fast forward to the trip in Florida, and we're walking around Disney World, and I'm pretty sure the first thing that really caught my eye was Cinderella's castle, because it's just, it's one of those things that everybody knows about. It's fairly aesthetic, it looks cool. So I just took my phone out and took a picture of it. Nothing special, just, regular portrait mode, holding it up, click, no editing, of course. And I posted that to my Instagram, just saying, some little caption. And the response that I got on it from all my friends was actually really, really good, especially in comparison to everything that I had posted before that. So after I posted that one, I kind of got a little excited, and that was at the beginning of that trip. And so as the trip went on, I think every single day I made it a point to try and take one postable photo. So it would be stuff like there was that like a cool pirate ship on one of the beaches that we visited. When we went to Epcot or to Universal Studios, there were cool buildings that I took pictures of, and I posted those. And on every single one of them, people really started to like it, and because people liked it and I got excited at them liking it, I started thinking really quickly. I started thinking much more carefully about how I was taking the photo, and that's the moment that I started getting into like the photographer mindset, which I had never really done before. I was looking at different kinds of lines or shapes or textures, cool colors. My eye would catch some like cool contrast and tonality on some buildings, and I would just find that interesting. At the time, I couldn't really pinpoint why I was liking these things, but now that it's been years since, and I know a little bit about why those photos were kind of aesthetic, I understand my interest toward them. So throughout this whole trip, I just took photos like that and posted them. And like I said, the response was really, really good. And so after that, when I came back home, I, not too long after, visited my aunt and uncle at their property somewhere else in town. And they have a bigger property where they have a bunch of really cool cottonwood trees and just some cool nature, if you will. And for a couple days while I was hanging out there, visiting both them and my grandparents, I just walked around again just with my cell phone, and I started snapping extra little photos. Pretty quickly, I got interested in like macro style photography, putting my camera really up close to something and focusing as closely as I could. I think I just was really drawn to the depth that you can get in those photos, but I couldn't say for certain. But I would walk around this whole property and I would see these cool angles and these really cool textures and things, whether it was the bark on one of those trees or kind of the fraying knots on a rope swing that my cousins had, stuff like that. And I just kept snapping photos. And as I got these photos and I started accumulating this collection, I of course kept posting them and more and more and more. And people just really ended up liking it. And so at that moment, I had kind of figured out that I liked taking photos. I didn't know at the time if it was for the photos themselves or if it was because, of the response that I was getting online, but there was something good happening there, and I could really tell that. Like I said, this started in like September, maybe October of 2014. And this cell phone / macro photography interest lasted for a long time, probably until May of the next year, about maybe even a little later. And so I just took little snapshotty photos for that whole time. Then in very beginning of June of 2015, I was up in Chama, New Mexico with my grandparents, which is just a little mountain town right on the New Mexico-Colorado border. Gone there almost every summer since I was a little kid, and just for little camping trips. My birthday had just passed, and so I had, some extra birthday money, and I was still definitely into taking photos, which I was still just doing with my phone. And I started talking to my mom a little bit about getting an actual camera, because during the school year that had just passed, one of my best friends had bought a entry-level Nikon DSLR. And she would bring it to campus, and we would just be sitting at lunch. She would take photos of everybody, and we would look at them, and the quality was really cool. I never really knew that something that simple would give you such quality. Now I know it's because of the bigger sensors and the nicer lenses and stuff like that. But it was really, really attractive. So I started looking on Amazon at the same camera that she had. And I was talking to my mom about it because she's the one who was handling all that money. I ended up pulling the trigger on it. And so I got a Nikon D3300 camera, which is the entry-level Nikon at the time. And with it, I got their kit, like 18 to 55 millimeter lens, and their kit 55 to 200 millimeter lens. And then I got like a carrying bag with it. So that way, I didn't really know at the time, but that way I had some nice sort of variability with what I could shoot. I could go wide to pretty telephoto, and I could be kind of creative with that. So I was going to be up in Chama for a little while longer, and it's a very, very beautiful place, a lot of nice nature around there, and I really wanted to be able to utilize the camera while I was there. So we had it shipped to the post office up in town, and when I tell you that I could not wait for this camera to come in. I've seriously never been more excited for something to come in the mail and for me to be able to use something. One day, my grandpa and I were driving back from a little fishing trip to a nearby lake, and either my mom called me or she texted me and she said, "Hey, I got confirmation that the package was delivered." So we rushed over to the post office because, of course, I was way too excited to not. There it was. So for the next think I was up there for another week or two. I had this really nice new camera to mess around with in this absolutely gorgeous area full of wildlife. You know, there were foxes, I don't know, 20, 30 feet away from our trailer. There were big trees everywhere. There were rivers, there were lakes, gorgeous sunsets, of course. And so I just had a lot of fun. It feels like I remember I would take the camera out for a couple minutes and just experiment with it, bring it back in, set it on the table. Then after another 30 minutes, I would pick it back up because I was too excited to not touch it and go use it again. So I'd just go in and out, in and out, in and out, you know, messing with this camera. And I had so much fun with it. The really exciting part after that was getting able to try some astrophotography. So I had seen, because I was into photography for a little while prior to getting this camera, I had, of course, seen really cool photos online just by looking stuff up. The first time I was exposed to astrophotography, you know, photos of the night sky or of the Milky Way specifically, I was blown away that you could take those photos. And so, as most beginner photographers do, I just Googled, you know, how to take pictures of the Milky Way. And I clicked on one of the first little tutorial sites that came up, and it said, you know, get a tripod, which I thankfully had. I don't know why or how or where. You know, set the camera up, do this with the shutter speed, do this with the focusing, da. And so I one night went out with my brother just right outside our trailer because there was no lights right outside of it. I pointed the camera up to the sky, close to a tree where I think the Milky Way was. I had him help me get the focus just right on the camera. And I hit the shutter button and waited a few seconds. And then when that shutter clicked again and the screen lit back up, I was so blown away and so excited at what I had just got. Now, by my standards now, it was not a good photo of the Milky Way. But at the time, knowing that I could capture something like that was really cool. And so that first photo sparked one of my biggest interests in photography, which I still have now, and that's astrophotography. Getting to capture the night sky in the Milky Way has always been one of the most interesting things I've ever done. So through the summer, I would, you know, mess around with the camera a little bit more here and there, but I hadn't gone on any other big trips really like I did with Chama. In early August or late July, I forget which, of that same year, we took a trip to eastern Massachusetts along Cape Cod and then into Boston. And I brought my camera along for that because there's no way I wasn't going to when I was going out there. And I took some photos of lakes out there and Red Sox games, stuff like that. Unfortunately, I have no clue where all those photos are today. I think I must have stored them on an old device and then that somehow got wiped. I'm not quite sure, but I don't have them anymore, sadly. But as time progressed and as I used this camera more, I really just got into it. I really did. And this interest only compounded upon itself. So for the next, I think it would have been a year and a half or so, I would take some cool trips and I'd bring this camera along with me. You know, one of the bigger ones being a week-long trip to Spain where we visited Barcelona for a few days and then Madrid for a few days. And I brought my camera along to capture photos of my friends, my classmates. It was a class trip. Photos of the architecture over there, because that's, you know, by far the most beautiful part of both of those cities is the old and rustic architecture. And it helped me to really expand my horizons from there. It was really cool. And at this point, I was definitely getting more serious with photography. I was learning a lot more. I was finally starting to shoot with some more manual controls. I was not just dipping my toe in the water, but I was really starting to step in. It was really cool. So as I was doing more research on, you know, newer gear to get, because I knew that what I had at the time, that same entry-level Nikon, I knew that down the road it wouldn't cut it anymore and that I would want to upgrade. So after a trip to Best Buy one afternoon, I found another Nikon that I was really interested in. And in August of 2016, I believe, I bought that camera. So that one was a Nikon D7200, which is another crop body that they offered, but it was much more advanced in what it could do. I was really excited about like its HDR capability specifically. You know, the fact that it had like a little light up screen on the top of it where I could read my shutter speed and aperture and all that. But, you know, beyond that, I didn't know a whole lot. And so I would have that camera for another year and a half or so. What I started doing pretty soon after getting that camera was experimenting more with different kinds of long exposure photography. So I just heard of what a neutral density filter was, which for those of you who don't know is a filter that basically limits the amount of light that can come into a lens, and it allows you to do long exposure shots when it's too bright out. It's like doing waterfall photos during the day or stuff like that. It just helps you to get long exposure things when the light is too heavy. So I'd gotten a fairly cheap one from Best Buy, and during a little trip, like a little weekend trip that we took to Colorado, I found a waterfall, and I tried it out with that. Putting this ND filter on and then getting that silky, smooth-looking water going around these rocks. And that was really exciting. That was the first time that I had ever tried any kind of long exposure beside doing night sky stuff, because of course I'd never been able to do anything during the day before. And so that was definitely some new territory. But the biggest new territory that I had stepped into at that time was actually editing. So, and I'm ashamed to admit this, for about the first 2 years or so of having that camera, or doing photography in general, the way I would edit photos, and you can't see me, but I'm air quoting the word edit, is I would use the app Visco, or VSCO, which is kind of just a more Tumblr, sort of bougie, sort of Instagram app, if you will. But they do have some editing controls built in, where if you import photos, you can mess with your highlights, your shadows, your saturation, your sharpness, your clarity, all the main sliders most of us are used to. And so I was editing every single photo through that app. And editing is one way to put it. I would throw it in there and just mess with some stuff just to see how I can make it look, and then take it back out. But at no point was I ever really taking the time to really sit down and get the light and the color how I wanted it to. So I had heard about Adobe Lightroom before, and of course I had heard of Photoshop, but I didn't know what each were capable of. So on my iPad that I had at the time, I didn't buy it, but I got the Lightroom mobile app, and I think I was actually paying for a Lightroom subscription. I just wasn't fully using it yet. And on that same Colorado trip, I started messing with the photos I was taking, but in Lightroom, and actually messing with all of the HSL sliders and their more advanced light and color sliders other than that, and seeing what I could do with photos that way. And immediately I was blown away with the quality that I was getting compared to how it looked before. And from that moment on is when I really started to actually edit, and I started practicing with that a lot more. And thankfully that's a skill that I picked up pretty quickly. Not too long after that, I felt like a pretty intermediate to advanced editor with just how much I was practicing with it, which was nice. I felt like I got a nice jump start with things. So this would lead me into, I believe, my senior year of high school. And throughout that year, I would definitely get more and more into photography. During the art class that I took that year, as opposed to previous years, I focused much more on doing photography work than anything else. Before that, I would try some painting, I would try some woodwork and then sculpture stuff. None of it really piqued my interest. But in this last year, I did almost exclusively photography and seeing what sort of creative things I could do with that, which was really cool, delving into this thing, not only in my personal life, but also doing it more on the academic side it was a new step, and it was kind of cool to immerse myself a little bit more. As the spring approached, in my senior year, I had found this local gallery in the downtown of Albuquerque, in our little Old Town Plaza. And one afternoon, as I was just strolling around there, and I just happened upon that gallery, I went in and I noticed that there were a couple artists in there who were landscape photographers, and I saw their work, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And it gave me the vision and the idea of, what if I had my work in a gallery? I think that at some point, every photographer would love to have their stuff shown like that. So I grabbed the card of the main photographer that I saw in there, and I shot him an email. I said, hey, I visited the gallery. I really loved your work. I personally would love to start doing stuff like this. Could we have a meeting where you could kind of teach me some stuff? And thankfully, he actually said yes, and he agreed to meet with me. So one morning I went down to the gallery where he was volunteering at, and we chatted for a good hour or so. And he gave me some rough pointers as to, what things I could expect and what things I would do if I really did want to go down this road. But the biggest resource that he gave me was pointing me toward a large local camera club that was in town in Albuquerque. So their name is the Enchanted Lens Camera Club, and they've been around since, I believe, the late 1950s, definitely at least the 1960s. And as it stands right now and right then, they have about 300 members or so. And I of course, had never heard of them, but I decided to join, and it felt really cool because now I was like, starting to get much more serious about photography. I was joining a club. Like that's a big deal. And so for the next couple meetings they would have, I would learn some really interesting stuff. Like hearing from this one guy who actually knew Ansel Adams and talked a little bit about his style, to going to some of their critiques where members would submit photos and everybody would kind of judge them and rank them, which was cool. Doing a more casual version of that, it was a cool step, because now I was getting much more serious and I was with much more like-minded people. After a couple months of just being a regular member there, I actually became part of the board. I became the membership chairperson, where I would handle just member relations basically for the whole club. But I was actually on the board for everything, so I got much more invested in getting to know everybody there, learning from the more seasoned veterans that were part of the club. And it really helped amp up my style. It really helped me to get much more serious about what I was doing. So I would do that for a couple more months through the winter of 2017, after graduating from high school and then into winter of that year. Now, between then, I did have some really, really cool experiences, the biggest of which would be during that summer, getting to take a trip out to California to do a workshop with at the time, my most idol photographer, Chris Burkhardt, who's a very, very well-known and renowned travel and landscape photographer who has a very, very natural style, and I really liked that at the time. And so for, I think it was 3 days, I got to hang out at his gallery in Central California, and I get to learn, feels like everything from him, and we even got to go on some shoots with him. And the notes that I took during that workshop, I still go back to and reference to this day because it was such good info. But between getting to meet all of the people that I did there, I think I had like 14 or 15 really, really talented classmates, and then getting to meet Chris himself and seeing his work and actually getting him to look at my work and critique it a little bit, that was a really, really good stepping stone. And that is kind of one of the first building blocks that went along in me deciding that, this might be a professional route that I want to go down. This might be a serious route that I want to go down, because everything that I had seen from him and had heard from him was just super exciting to me and really, really interesting. And, I didn't know it at the time, but it was definitely an integral part in where I'm at now. Even. So for the next few months, I would just piddle around with the camera a little bit more. I had started college in August of that year, and so photography had taken kind of a backseat as I was, getting used to that. But in March of the next year, I would take a pretty exciting plunge into some new stuff. So thanks to the club that I was still a part of and one of the members that was in it, I was able to purchase my first mirrorless Sony camera, which was the Sony A7R II. At the time, this was the same camera that Chris Burkhardt was using, and so I had heard a whole lot about it, both from when I did my workshop with him and then just other stuff on Instagram. And so having the opportunity to both check one out and actually buy it was huge for me. And it was really, I'm still very, very thankful that I had that opportunity. So once I got that camera, I only had one lens for a little while, and it was this really, really super wide crop lens. I still wasn't fully aware of what I was doing. I didn't fully know what I was talking about still. So the lens that I got just wasn't a perfect fit for it, but I digress. But I had this one lens for a little while, and I enjoyed the camera. I really did. It was much, much more advanced than the two Nikons I had. Those were crop censored, more entry level, easier DSLRs, and this was a much more advanced professional level camera, which was both pretty daunting, but at the same time, like really, really, really exciting. And so as time went on, as I spent more time with the club, as I experimented more with this camera, like I said, this idea of developing an actual career with photography kept building more and more and more. So I would put more work into a Facebook page, put a little bit more work into my Instagram, into my website, and I would start pushing like print sales a little bit. Or at the time, I was doing a little bit more portrait work, and so I would push my portrait services a little more than normal. Trying to get some business, trying to get my name out there, and it really did end up making a difference. So I got that camera in March of 2018. which was, the second semester I was doing in college. Then in my fall semester of that same year, because I was starting to think much more seriously about photography, I actually decided to take a photography class at the university. I was at the University of New Mexico. And so I did one semester of this class. I got to meet some really cool people there, and I definitely learned some new things. But the biggest thing that it did for me was lay the groundwork and kind of lay that base layer of me being serious with photography and just committing to it a little bit more, which was definitely necessary. And it helped me in ways that I wouldn't realize until the next year. So in my fourth semester, the spring of 2019, I was still going to school. At the time, my major was computer science, because that's what I was interested in. But I was getting more interested in photography than anything else. And I had always had a pretty good interest in photography, but it had always taken either a passenger seat or a back seat to whatever else I was doing. I hadn't made it the forefront of what was interesting to me. And I'm not sure really what flipped, but I grew this unquenchable passion to go take photos. And so there would be many, many mornings in that year where I would skip out on a morning class that I had, whether it was something simple like gym or yoga, or even sometimes a math class, because I wanted to go take photos so badly, or I wanted to do something with photography so badly, and I could not not do it. And so as it started going on, and as that semester progressed, I started to get much, much more, I'm hesitant to use the word depressed, but it put me in a fairly down state. Not being able to always do what I'm passionate about, having to put this other work into my Calculus 2 class, or my computer science class, or my anthropology class, these things that I'm not passionate about, it was really, really, really starting to wear on me. And I noticed that every bit of free time that I had, I was putting toward photography. And that kind of showed me, hey, this is what you're really into, and I think you need to decide what you need to do here. And thankfully, the decision wasn't too hard. Between the fall semester of 2018 and the spring semester of 2019, I had actually lost my scholarship to the university. It's a whole ordeal that's for another time. I was no longer obligated to stay at school. Prior to losing that, the main reason I was really staying was, I got a really, really nice scholarship. It would be silly of me to not fully go through with this and get my degree if I'm basically paying nothing. But in my spring semester, once I lost that scholarship, there wasn't really anything holding me to school, So after a lot of conversations with my parents and grandparents, I made the decision to leave school. At the time, it was just going to be a gap year. I was going to take the fall off, and at the time, I had a job. I was working at a Chipotle, and so I was going to take the next year off, focus on just working, saving some money, and then just focusing on photography so much more. And that is honestly one of the greatest decisions I have ever made. So the following summer of 2019, I would be lucky enough to start meeting a lot of really talented local shooters here mainly in Albuquerque, but also in just the surrounding areas. And those people that I've met and I'm fantastic friends with now are sort of the backbone of where I'm at now. They've really pushed me to get to this next level, which is really cool. And over the next year, a lot of growing has happened. Later in that year, I would end a relationship that I had been in a pretty long time, and I had a lot of time to really focus on myself and to really grow both who I was, figure out what I was really interested in, and just compound upon that and refine who I thought I wanted to be, which was really exciting. Also around then, I started doing not only photography, but thanks to one of the people that I've met, his name's Ian Beckley, one of my best friends now. He showed me how to do time lapses with photos, and that has become one of my favorite things to do now. I had always thought when you do a time lapse, you just regularly record a video and then you speed it up afterwards, which you technically can still do. But he showed me the quality that you can get by doing it as a sort of photography-centered art form, and it was so new. It was one of those new things that I got excited about and curious about. And so now, ever since then, they've become a much larger part of what I like to do, which is really, really cool. So like I said, after I left school for that year and I started my gap year, and then after that relationship ended, I had a lot of time to focus on me, what I'm interested in, and to kind of be spontaneous with things. I wasn't really obligated to anything for the first time in a long time, which was exciting. So I would take, my first trip down to White Sands National Park in southern New Mexico with some friends. I would later go down there alone, which I had never, thought of even doing before. I would go to Moab, Utah with some of those friends. I would go to another part of southern New Mexico. I'd go to Colorado by myself. So I started taking all of these really, really cool trips and all these really interesting adventures. And this was only a few months ago. And I noticed that, between trying out all these different places and really honing my skills, that the quality of my work has also really gone up, which is really, I know I've said this a lot during this podcast episode, but it's really exciting, seeing that that progression between what I was producing even early last year or before that compared to now is really, really interesting, and it's inspiring. It shows me that I'm on the right path. Also, in this time, I've, the last time I talked about editing was back in 2016 when I started. My editing techniques have way, way, way improved, and I've become much more than a hobbyist, and I just feel a lot more confident with my skills compared to how I did before, which is really cool. So the plan with the gap year was to go back to school in the fall of 2020, which would be, basically right now. But during my gap year, I had actually spoken to a local photographer who's been doing it professionally for 20, maybe 30 years now, because I wanted his insight on both the industry, the viability of a career like that, and I just wanted some sort of, insider info. And one thing that he told me, and I'm still very, very thankful that I had this meeting with him, was that even though, yes, photography, if I'm that passionate about it, is absolutely the way to go, there may be times where it's not the best road to take, and getting a different career, at least for a partial amount of time, would be a smarter option. So he suggested the idea of go back to school, get a very simple degree, just get a degree so that you can have a nicer job and get some money, and you won't have to rely on this career so heavily. And for a while, that was going to be my plan. I was going to go back to school, get a degree in probably business management, something easier, very applicable, and it would make a decent amount of money. And then I would do that kind of job and just focus on photography as much as I could on the side. And then once it became successful enough, fully transfer over to it. But in the early months of this year, as I was racking my brain with this sort of decision, I came to the conclusion that that's just not what I wanted to do. I'm somebody who, when I'm passionate about something, I want to put 120% of my effort into it. And I know that if I was both going to school, which had made me incredibly unhappy the year prior and had sent me to a pretty low point, I knew that going back to that and then getting a career in a field that I knew I wasn't incredibly passionate about would be more detrimental to me than not doing it. So I made the command decision that I'm fully just going to leave the idea of school and I'm not going to go back, hopefully, ever, which was kind of a difficult decision for a couple of reasons. I have a fairly academic family. My two of my grandparents are college professors, and they've always, taught me to really strive for excellence. And so I've always had this notion in my head that if you don't, get a high school degree and then get a college degree and then get a good hearty job, that you're kind of a failure in life. I was sort of raised to think that way, not on purpose, but that's just how, when I was growing up, that's just what I learned, both just from experience and from what I heard from other people. When I made this decision to fully leave school, I felt kind of disappointed in myself. But as the months have gone on since I made this decision, I've been very, very thankful that I've done so. So that's where I'm at now. Right now I'm recording this in the middle of August, and I'm still in the throes of figuring out exactly where I want to go. I have a pretty good idea, and I'm very, very, very excited about it. But that's where I'm sitting. Not too long ago, only a couple months ago, I made this decision. I don't want to go back to school. I want to fully focus on photography full time. I want my career to be landscape photography. And I've been putting as much work as possible, as much effort as possible into making that a reality. So if you're listening to this, as you probably already know, I recently launched a brand new website with a brand new brand, where I have, new prints, and I'm expanding my brand as a whole, which is a step I had wanted to take for a long time, but I had never fully made the plunge until I made this decision that, this is going to be my career and I need to really do something about it. So looking toward the future, where I think that I really want to go is, I sort of, as a blanket statement, just really want to teach people. That's my second real passion in life, is getting to teach people about things that I'm passionate about. In fact, one of the career options I had thought about while I was at college was actually going into like high school math education and becoming a math teacher. I've always been a numbers person. I've always enjoyed math, to many people's surprise. And that helped me discover that, hey, I like teaching people, and that might be something that I can apply when it comes to photography, when it comes to photos. So as time goes on in the future, I really want to put more of an emphasis on doing things like workshops, whether it's, a live stream sort of thing where I teach folks there, or, a video package purchasable on my website, or ideally, I don't know how things will work with this, the virus that's currently still going on, but getting to do in-person adventure workshops and hosting them in different parts of the country, or maybe even the world, is the biggest end goal for me. Getting to do that is going to be so cool when it happens. Also getting to teach people with tutorials over on like my YouTube page, a little bit on my Instagram, also maybe in person, is something really exciting. And then just getting to share my work, whether that's just sending out a digital version onto the internet, or actually getting to show people prints of my work, is really where I want to go. I really hope that this career pans out in the future. It's still a long shot dream, and most dreams like this are. I know that with enough work and with enough effort, with enough passion in what I'm interested in, that anything can really be possible. And I know that sounds cliche, but I truly do believe that. So that's the story of how I got here. It's been 6 years in the making of, from getting just a cell phone on a family trip and taking some interesting photos that my friends liked, to starting to get actual cameras and figuring out my niche of what I'm interested in, and finding out that other people really enjoy my work, to figuring out that, this is what I want to do the rest of my life, and this is what I'm really passionate about. It's been a road I never would have imagined I would have gone down. I actually wrote a book in the beginning of last year in 2019. It's called Beginning, and you can find it on my website. And in the very beginning of it, I talk about how I'm one of the least artistic people that I've ever met. When I mention that I'm a math person, it's because I think in a very technical way. I am not a very good creative thinker. And so when it came to art, whether it was art class or just doing stuff on my own, it was very hard for me to come up with and create anything. And just any kind of art form was always very difficult for me. So if you had told me, 7-8 years ago that, hey, down the road when you're 2021, you're going to be a semi-professional photographer, I would have said you were, full of it. There's no way I'm going to go down that road. But, here I am, expect the unexpected, I guess. But I couldn't be more thankful for where I'm at, who I've met, the experiences that I've had on this road so far. It's all, as I've said many times already, it's very, very exciting. So I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about my story from, beginning to where I'm at now, and then looking toward the future. If any of you are in a similar boat and you're wanting to do something that you're passionate about, but you just either haven't found the motivation, or you're scared to take that jump, take it from me, and I'm not all the way there yet, but just take it from me as someone who has taken that plunge to an extent. Following your gut, following your passion, and what strikes you in life is one of the best decisions that you can make. If you can, of course, there are going to be other factors at play, of course. But if you can take that jump and really, really go after what you're passionate about, even though there may be some discomfort along the way, it is 125% worth it. And it's been the most liberating and exciting part of my life. If you'd like to see more from me, like I said at the beginning, you can follow me over on Instagram at McMains Media. Again, that's McMains Media. YouTube and Facebook are the exact same thing, or visit my website, mcmainsmedia.com. Hopefully I'll be doing these podcasts somewhat regularly, but it's not something I'm going to really hold myself to. I want it to be like I said earlier, a very chill and relaxed sort of area. I don't want to put pressure on it. I just want it to be one of these places where I can vent and talk about what I'm passionate about. And I really appreciate y'all listening. So that'll be it for this first episode of my podcast. I really do hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great day, everybody.